What's trending today?
As I'm really happy to have on, he's been at it for the last week in Washington, D.C., getting ready to rock and roll for a whole new session. What could this year's session actually look like? He's a great friend. He's been on the program many times. He is my congressman here in the 4th Congressional District for the great state of Kansas. Really happy to have on Congressman Ron Estes. Congressman, how are you, my friend? Happy Monday.
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Andy?
Doing great. Happy New Year to you. I am so excited about this year. I know the countdown is counting down now 1 week from Donald Trump officially taking office. We saw the pictures of the U-Haul moving things in back to the White House again. This is a time where I think people are excited for the Republican majority in Congress in both chambers, even though in the House where you're at, you have just a slim majority with only 2 votes. But we have the majority in the House. We have it in the Senate. We have the presidency. Congressman, this is our time where it sounds like we can actually get a lot done.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, we're in a weird period right now where the House and the Senate were sworn in on January 3rd. And so we've got the new House and Senate with Republican majorities, but we still haven't had the presidential transition and had President Trump come in until a week from today. So, if something passes, the House and the Senate, it'd be up to President Biden to sign it. So we need to get till next Monday real quickly so that we can start moving forward. And we've been working both House and the Senate working together as well as working within our chambers to get prepared to be up and running. I mean, we've got so many things we've got to work on. Just the normal things that you run into in terms of, how do you manage healthcare issues? How do you make sure you support U.S. defense and defending our country? But also so many things that have been broken during the Biden administration, whether it's border security, which has allowed all the drugs to come into the country, allowed crime to increase, and all the consequences of that. We've seen this horrible runaway inflation, which the Biden administration is bragging that it's not as high as it was, but prices are still going up above expectations of the 2%, and people's salaries aren't going up under the Biden administration, and so they're still feeling the pain of that. So we've got to make sure we keep the economy going. A lot of the tax cut provisions that we passed my first year in Congress in 2017 are starting to expire, and a whole host of them expire this year. And so we've got to make sure that we address those and work to help make sure that we keep the economic growth going in the country. We don't want to go backwards, right, like we're starting to see now, because some of those provisions have expired.
Yeah, it's a full slate and a big agenda that you guys have right out of the gate. And first and foremost, for those that don't know, I want to congratulate you on the committees that you did get appointed to as well. Back on the Ways and Means Committee, I know that that's been kind of your focal point, working on the economy, working on the budget, extremely important. But also, you did get appointed as the chair for the Social Security Subcommittee. So congratulations on that. And I do want to talk about Social Security later on, but I know that's a huge impact here in the nation. But when it comes to, like you said, the Trump tax cuts, when it comes to the budget, we have a CR that's funding us through March right now. We're into March, where you guys are discussing what to do thereafter. We have the DOGE department that's looking at some of the regulation and some of the regulatory burden that we have right now. When it comes to the Trump tax cuts, for example, we have a reconciliation bill that's being discussed. What's been the conversation on that right now? Is it likely to get passed? And I got to ask, Congressman, I am curious on why we're compiling everything into one big bill as opposed to just ramming these things through one after the other individually. Kind of an odd approach to this one.
Yeah, the part of that, I mean, we have the Congress over the last 30 years has gotten in the bad habit of consolidating a lot of bills instead of passing and following a regular order process and passing pieces of legislation. One of the advantages that you have with a process called reconciliation is that you can bypass the Senate filibuster rules as long as you're passing legislation that deals with spending and or taxes. And in that case, you only need 51 votes in the Senate. And as polarizing as is now, there's so many folks on the Democrat side that want a bigger government, and therefore they want more taxes. And that's not good for the economy, not good for people. So we're at the point where we're looking at this process called reconciliation to look at, how can we keep the good economic activities going out of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Also looking at some of the provisions for work requirements. If you're going to receive assistance from the federal government, whether it's through food stamps or Medicare or other provisions, we're looking at shouldn't an individual either be working or looking for work, or going through an education and trying to get themselves better prepared to help care for their own families. And so that's what that process is. It is still tough. I mean, I don't want to beat the gong that because we have Republican majorities in the House and the Senate and the White House that everything's going to be panacea. It still is difficult to pass legislation. I mean, our founding fathers wanted a small government, so they didn't want to make it too easy to pass laws.
Right.
And unfortunately, that same process works against us when we try to cut back on some of the laws that have been built over the last 250 years. So we're going to be spending a lot of time continuing to work on how do we craft this? How do we make sure that we follow the rules of reconciliation? How do we also address things that are, there's different issues in a rural farming community than there is in the inner cities in New York and Chicago. And so some of the Republican members and Democrat members, but if we're using reconciliation, they'll probably all be Republican votes. Some of those issues are different in their particular district. So we've got to make sure that it works so that we can everybody feel like their district's being supported in that process.
Right. That's going to be nice. We're talking with Congressman Ron Estes from the 4th District of the great state of Kansas, my congressman here in Kansas. You had a piece, an op-ed out of the Daily Signal around the holiday time talking about the DOGE department, the regulatory burdens that we're going to hopefully start seeing go to the wayside. How closely is the Ways and Means Committee especially, but just Congress in general, ready to work with the DOGE department, the Department of Government Efficiency, Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy, wanting to find cutting out of the budget that we can just to simplify and streamline the process for these agencies, not even necessarily get rid of them, but just streamline them to make them more efficient, to get rid of the regulatory burdens that we have in the private sector? Does it seem like right now that these committees and Congress in general, again, are ready to work with DOGE, and how effective do you think it's going to look like this year?
Yeah, Ronald Reagan had it right when he said that a government bureau is the nearest thing to eternal life we'll ever see on this earth. So once you start a government program, it doesn't go away, even if it was only short-term need, because all of a sudden you've got people that are recipients of taxpayer money. You also got non-government organizations, NGOs, or charities that are dispersing that money. You've got the bureaucracy that's actually supposed to collect the taxes and then disperse that in the program. So it's a heated battle in terms of how do we keep government small. And I'm really looking forward to working with Elon and Vic as they work on different issues. There's so many things that we can look at because government's gotten so big. You mentioned things like regulatory issues. Those are some things that we can do a lot of rollback just by having a good administration in office, and they can focus on that. But you look at, there's got to be some legislation that passed out of it. Maybe we need to look at, should we consolidate some of the federal department and because of their missions overlap and on a similar, we one of the things I look at and use as an example is that there are 3 million executive branch employees, not counting the military. Wow! And if you compare that to the House and Senate combined, is just slightly over 1% of that. And the legislative branch, really of the three branches, is supposed to be the most important because we can actually pass a law and the president doesn't have to sign it. We passed something that has a 2/3 majority in the House and the Senate because it's the right thing to do. That's the way the country was set up. And so I think the legislative branch over the years has tended to put more responsibility in the executive branch. And we need to take back some of that responsibility. Things like the Loper Bright court decision that actually overturned the Chevron case that said, the legislative intent should be what's followed in rules and regulations instead of what the bureaucracy says. And so there's going to be a lot of work we need to do, but it's going to be great that Elon and Vivek are actually focusing on that. bringing together those ideas. And I'm a member of a House DOGE caucus. There's a Senate DOGE caucus as well. So people are very actively in terms of looking at ways that how we can actually rein in some of that spending and make the government the right size instead of making it as big as it is.
Yeah, good for you. I'm excited. I was not aware you were on the DOGE caucus in the House, so that's really exciting. You mentioned the consolidation of these programs and these agencies, and like you said, it's very difficult to get rid of them. The government agency, once it's created, I've never seen one go away. We heard during the campaign trail the teasing of Donald Trump saying we could potentially get rid of a Department of Education. We could reform the IRS. Now there's a major push. I know Congresswoman Lauren Boebert pushed and presented a bill to try to abolish the ATF. It seems far out there. It may be unlikely, but could we see some of these agencies go away? And we got just about a minute before we have to take a break, Congressman.
Yeah, I think that's a good possibility that we could do that. Obviously, that takes some work and takes some thought because there was a thought process that went into building these agencies. But why don't we look at things like should labor and education and commerce department all be in one department that focused on how do we grow our economy and help support American families and American jobs and American workers?
Yeah. It's wild. 3 million federal employees just on that one side. That's absolutely unbelievable to me. Let's take a break here. It's Congressman Ron Estes, 4th District of the great state of Kansas. We got one more segment with you, and I appreciate your time. When we come back, I want to touch on the big story that was broke today. Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House press secretary, trying to ram through as much as they can in their final days in office before they officially transition out. The announcement today: more student loan forgiveness for more than 150,000 students across the nation. The reasoning and who they're actually giving it to, I find interesting. As part of the Ways and Means Committee looking at the federal budget, Congressman, I got to get your thoughts on that and what that could do to our debt. And are we going to see some of these free giveaways go away in the new administration? Lots more coming up. Stay here.
This is the Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier. When reason meets radio. This is the Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
Biden-Harris administration is approving student loan relief for more than 150,000 borrowers, bringing the total number of Americans who have had their student debt approved to be canceled by the administration to over 5 million people. These 150 borrowers include almost 85,000 borrowers who attended schools that cheated and defrauded their students, 61,000 borrowers with total and permanent disabilities, and 6,100 public servant workers. This announcement builds on the historic actions our administration has taken to reduce the burden of student debt, hold bad actors accountable, and fight on behalf of students across the country.
Wow. So Karine Jean-Pierre making that announcement during the press briefing earlier today. More than 150,000 more individuals getting student loan forgiveness under the Biden administration. Nothing like waiting until the last minute before you're out of town and you know that the Supreme Court's already told you really can't do a lot of forgiveness, but yet finding new ways to do that's kind of weird to me. Talking about that, we got a few minutes left here with my congressman from the 4th Congressional District, Congressman Ron Estes. Congressman, this is kind of wild. Another announcement: 5 million people getting student loan forgiveness over the tenure of the Biden administration, and then the more they're trying to pile on right at the last minute. What is this doing to our national debt right now?
Yeah, it's sad that what they're trying to do. I mean, they've been told over and over again from the Supreme Court that they can't do this, the process that they're trying to do. And then they'll come back and propose another proposal and use A instead of D in terms of the sentencing and tweak it just a little enough to see if they can sneak that past somebody filing a lawsuit against prohibiting this. And they couch it in terms of it's a debt forgiveness. It's not a debt forgiveness. It's just transferring the debt to other taxpayers. I mean, people that students who worked while they were going to school instead of borrowed this much money because they didn't want a loan, or people that maybe delayed their education so that they could continue working full time and taking part time classes, and now they're going to have to pay back through their taxes for these loans, and so it's really just sad that that's what the administration is going out on. in terms of their behavior.
Yeah, it is sad, Congressman. Last question for you. We got just about 2 minutes left here, but I am optimistic that we could see the decrease in spending and the decrease in our debt. And I have to ask you, do you see that happening as well? And by decrease, I don't mean the typical government definition of a decrease in spending, where we just slow the growth of it. And they're like, well, it was going to grow at 6%. We're growing at 2% this year, so it's a 4% cut. I actually mean the numbers going down. And between what you guys are working on in the Ways and Means Committee for the upcoming federal budget for the end of this year and for next year's 2027 budget, with the DOGE department, with the consolidation and program cuts, could we actually start seeing for the first time in who knows how long the total number of actual spending actually go down at the federal level?
Yeah, I think we will by the end of this year. I think there's so much teed up now that's as we transition from the Biden administration to the Trump administration that it won't be an immediate decrease that we'll see. But all the efforts that we're putting into it, we've got so many things teed up now, and some of those are going to take a little bit of time to come to fruition. Ideally, by the end of this year, we'll get some movement in that regard so that we can show some progress, because we can't continue this process where we're borrowing $75,000 to $80,000 a second just because we're spending money for today's lifestyle and that our kids and grandkids are going to have to pay back.
Blows my mind. Congressman Ron Estes, 4th District of the great state of Kansas. Congressman, we appreciate everything that you do, my friend. Congratulations on the new committees and subcommittees. Rocking it in D.C. I'm optimistic for 2025. Let's get you back on for another update soon, my friend.
All right, great. Thank you, Andy.
Hey, as always, we appreciate it very much, and Happy New Year to you. 1 week away, inauguration, baby. It's going to be exciting. That's, again, Congressman Ron Estes right here in the 4th Congressional District.